Metrics are one of the core features in Galileo, and I want to walk through at a high level what they are and how they can help you evaluate your agentic application and push it to production. Galileo comes with a few out-of-the-box metrics. These are around certain areas, including agent quality, RAG quality, prompt quality. What this looks like in Galileo is if I click on Configure Metrics, some RAG quality metrics include chunk utilization. A new one we recently released is called chunk relevance to show how relevant each chunk retrieved is to the user's query. In terms of safety, you have things like output PII just to make sure that there's no PII in the LLM's response. You can just literally take the prompt. It's not secret rocket science here. You can click on edit metric, duplicate the metric, and you can see exactly the prompt we use to run the LLM as a judge on your different logs and traces in Galileo. There's also custom metrics, which allow you to write code-based evaluators. You're literally just writing code for the metrics. If I click on Configure Metrics, I can click on Create Metric and then click on Code-Powered Metric. And I want to apply this code-powered metric to spans, and I can put in a code metric like this. And all it's doing is just counting the number of traces within a session. These are all deterministic metrics, but you can also create your own LLM as judge metrics by clicking on LLM as a judge. And then your metric might be something like, I want to create a metric that determines if the LLM is providing financial advice, because that's something you probably don't want your model to do. Click generate prompt, and it'll give you a high-level prompt on this specific type of metric, and you can configure all the different models and things like that here on the left-hand panel. The final piece about custom metrics is you can create composite metrics. And so my composite metric, I've selected these two existing LMS judge metrics, and I want to use these in this composite metric. That's called rows metric. And it's just simply taking an average of these two metrics based on some conditions here. So there's a lot of flexibility with these code-based metrics. One final note about metrics is that sometimes they are not perfect, and you might want to tune them or just provide your feedback on what that metric should be when you basically disagree with the LM as a judge. So as an example, let's say I'm looking at these traces, and I see over here, this metric is giving me a percentage on whether or not the user was frustrated. And apparently this conversation, let's click in here, the user is asking about buying some shares and yada, yada, yada. So if I go back and I want to leave some feedback on that specific session saying, you know what, I actually don't think that the user was frustrated, I can click on auto improve metric, and I actually want this 32% to be a 0%, and I'll leave feedback for this judge saying this is actually 0% because user was not frustrated at all. And then apply this to, let's say, the last hour of logs, and I can click on retune metric, and then the judge will calibrate itself so that future conversations like this will properly be classified as 0% instead of 33%. To step back a little bit and think about how metrics and evals tie into your overall workflow for building reliable agents, you create these high-level metrics, but at the end of the day, you're only 50 or 60% of the way there in terms of accuracy. Even our out-of-the-box metrics are not perfect. So you have the models you're playing with the prompt data set, you're still just halfway there. You start doing these things like what I just did with the auto-tuning metric. I'm providing feedback on the metric. You're tuning the metric to be more accurate on your traces. And the goal is to achieve this really high accuracy LM as a judge. And so you're now getting able to trust that the metrics and evals are correct. Furthermore, you can fine tune a small language model. We have one called Luna, where you can make the judge even more specific to your use case and also very cost effective. And these evals eventually become real-time guardrails for your applications. As new users or customers are talking with your agentic applications, these guardrails will automatically deflect and properly protect your customers and users in terms of the inputs and the outputs going into the application. And then as your application evolves over time, you start to identify new edge cases, and those becomes evals and metrics, again, starting in this cycle over and over again. This idea of today's evals are tomorrow's guardrails is something we see pretty common with our customers. Now, this is the hard sell for using Luna or any small language model. This is from a real production use case with a Fortune 500 customer. They have 50 use cases, let's say, with around 5 metrics per use case. So those 250 metrics being calculated. And so if you're using just a simple off-the-shelf Gemini 2.5, let's say Flash model, your average cost of metrics is $81,000 per day. But then with a small language model, which is fine-tuned specific to calculating these metrics, you're down to $4,000 per day. And the big savings is $25 million over a year. So you can turn on Luna in your cluster, just reach out to me or the team. And we also have to provision specific GPUs within the cluster. Finally, a new feature that came out is signals. And signals are essentially a way to detect anomalies and unknown unknowns within your agentic application. These are all from looking at your sessions and your traces. It's like a news cycle of what's going on or what's warnings in your application. But the important thing is if I click on one of these signals, I see there's a suggested action from the signal along with showing me which spans are affected. I can view the affected spans in the table. These are the individual sessions or spans that caused that signal to appear. And the key intuition here is that I can create a metric automatically from the signal, and Galileo is helping customers basically detect what's going on live that you may not be thinking about. And you just turn that signal directly into a metric that you can now use as a column within your sessions or your traces.